In some ways, Mr. Trump, by being undiplomatic and by doing diplomacy through Truth Social, is undermining the foundations of India-US relationship, because what it is doing is it is generating a lot of resentment in India, and it is constraining the space for Indian government to manage their ties with Washington in a more stable and subtle manner. Of course, we know that India and a US partnership has a strategic dimension. We know that it has solid foundations. We know that it is governed by various factors beyond just the presidential or institutional commitments that the two nations have with each other. There is a long post-1990s history to this relationship, and all governments in India across party lines and all governments, all administrations in the US across party lines have worked to strengthen this relationship. The more President Trump undermines this relationship publicly, the more he humiliates India and India's leadership, the more difficult it would be for Indian leadership to come to a modus vivendi with the US, and that is going to be, I think, a loss for the US as well, because America's Indo-Pacific policy is nothing if India is not part of that matrix. So in a sense, we are looking at a lot of disruption that Mr. Trump is bringing to both India-US relationship, but also the wider Indo-Pacific policy that America should be pursuing given its own interests as it has identified. I think for India, the choice is not really there, because certainly it would want strong ties with the US, but it also needs cheap energy. It needs energy which can continue to sustain our rates of growth and which is sustainable, because we are still a poor country, relatively poor country, and sustainable energy prices are what is needed for the political economy of this country to sustain itself. So it's not a very it's not an easy choice to make, but I do think that that President Trump is undermining the foundations of India-US relationship by the way he has gone about tackling the challenges in coming to terms with the India-US trade deal. I personally don't think that's possible given where America is today and where the world order is going. The Cold War era was different, where Americans were trying to fight the Soviet Union, and therefore Afghanistan, the Afghan theater was important. Post 2001, September 11, the Afghanistan theater became once again important because of the war on terror. But I don't think there is any fundamental dynamic, underlying dynamic that is shaping the US to move towards Pakistan. I think it is largely Mr. Trump's frustration with India that is showing in his dealings with Pakistan. It is largely a very tactical attempt to get things from India which India is not willing to concede on. I don't think there are solid foundations of a US-Pakistan relationship at the moment, whether in the body politic of the US or in the larger foreign policy and strategic community in the US. They don't view Pakistan as a partner that that is going to shape the global order with them. In fact, it's the other way around. India is seen widely as a partner that has the potential to shape the global order. So I think it's a tactical adjustment that Trump is making, hoping that these tactics would push India in a certain direction, and the more India is not delivering on that front, the more frustrated he is becoming. You see, once again, I think it reflects his frustration with the Russians, that he had come to power saying that he would, if he had been in office, no such war would have been fought. He came to power he came to his presidency in January saying that he would resolve this problem within 24 hours. Nothing of that sort has happened. In fact, the Russia-Ukraine war has intensified. Putin is not going to listen to Trump because for him the battlefield realities matter more, and Zelensky, of course, has its own agenda, that is to push back Russian aggression. So I don't think either of the two sides are listening to him, and in that frustration, initially he thought that if he keeps on dangling some sort of a partnership with Russia, Russians would come to the negotiating table. Russians have not done that, and Russians also realize that the wider sentiment in the US, in the West, is largely anti-Russian. So even if Mr. Trump wants a stable India-Russia relationship, that relationship is not going to happen just because Mr. Trump wants it. There are solid institutional, structural reasons why India-Russia relationship is what it is. Sorry, US-Russia relationship is what it is. So I do think that in that frustration that is building up, that he's not been able to either in some way end this conflict, Russia-Ukraine conflict, or that he's been able to bring Russians to the negotiating table, or that Russians are taking his side. He's getting frustrated, and because he does diplomacy publicly, the moment former president of Russia, Medvedev, made certain statements, he became even more volatile. He had to react. He had to demonstrate that he's a strong leader to his base. And therefore, he decided to send nuclear submarines. I don't know what purpose they are. Nuclear submarines are a nuclear deterrent. They provide you second strike capability. So I don't know what he's trying to, what the message is, what kind of messaging he wants to convey. But clearly, there are problems brewing for Trump on multiple fronts, where countries are pushing back, and he's not getting what he had hoped he would when he came to office early in January. Very difficult to say, because foreign policy is of course also contingent on what others do to us. So in that sense, how China and Russia and the US would react or would position themselves on that also would depend Indian responses. But one thing is clear, that Trump would remain a volatile force as far as India is concerned, and what he has done in the last few weeks and months has added that sense of volatility even more in India-US relationship. With China, of course, India's relations are stabilizing, but China remains the most important strategic challenge in the short to medium term. So while Trump is a challenge, in terms of his personality, in terms of the way he's making policy, the broader problem, structural problem for India lies with China. I think the Russia still is a wild card, given the way things are moving and going. Russia and India partnership, if one can tailor that to suit our needs at the present moment, it can be a very valuable balancer in a period where volatility is going to be the norm and predictability is going to be scarce. So I do think that Indian foreign policy would try to balance most actors. It is going to be extremely difficult, as we are hearing from Trump and his administration, and I think that pressure is going to grow on India to choose sides. How India decides to balance this would be important. We have seen, for example, that MEA has made a very measured statement on Trump and what they're trying to do with their partnership with the US, because it underscores the point that I was making earlier, that India-US partnership is essential both for India's strategic needs and India's developmental needs. But it also is contingent now on what Mr. Trump does, because that will generate a kind of a public sentiment that the government of India would find difficult to ignore. So I think we are going to see a balancing act by India, but how far India will be able to do that would depend on how far the three primary players in India's foreign policy matrix relate to each other. See, I think challenges will be there for India's growth story if the present trends continue, and if Mr. Trump decides to be really disruptive, because there are certainly, given the scale of American economy and its global presence, there are things that America can do that can disrupt a lot of, that can be disruptive in a number of ways. But I think fundamentally, because of Indian market, because India has been in some ways insulated, India is not as integrated into the global markets as some of the other economies are. I think India is in some ways secure and insulated, but how do you, I think the problem for India has been that how do you accelerate this growth process, and there I think the trouble would lie, that if we do face these negative headwinds, then India would struggle in accelerating the growth and the momentum that India has got in the last few years, and that would be a challenge both economically, but more importantly for politically for the government.